Chapter 8. Leaving the bent old crone behind him, Petulengro hurried down the narrow track to where another track ran off at right angles. This was narrow and overgrown, and difficult to make out. Had Petulengro not known it was there, he would possibly have hurried past. He bent under the low-lying branches that grew over the track and, after a few meters, emerged into a small clearing. Instinctively, he shied to one side as he realized that Jerome was only a few meters away, holding the collar of a massive black dog. Petulengro knew its name, Demon Tooth. Its coat was black, but not a healthy, glossy black. This coat was matted and wiry. The skin underneath the short hair was scarred in a dozen places, mementos of the fights Demon Tooth had contested, and these scars formed ridges and corrugations in the fur. Its head was large and the shoulders and body powerful. The eyes were wild and yellow, and the lips were drawn back in a furious snarl, the dog's mouth white with slobber as it struggled in Jerome's grip. Normally, Demon Tooth would be held by a heavy chain. But Jerome had unfastened it and now gripped the dog between his knees to restrain it. He had both hands on a thick leather collar around its neck, holding its head straight so that it couldn't savage him. Demon Tooth, sensing that the chain no longer restrained him, fought to free himself completely. Jerome was a powerful man, but the strength of the dog's struggling was almost beyond him. He glared at Petulengro now. "Bring the shepherd," he said. "I'm moving the dogs to a new spot." Every few days, he would move the dogs to a new hiding place to make sure that they remained undiscovered. Petulengro looked across the clearing. On the far side, chained to a tree, was the black and white border shepherd Jerome had stolen. Petulengro eyed the dog warily. Under Jerome's instructions, he had spent the past few days teasing it and provoking it, trying to overcome its natural good temper. Yesterday, he had succeeded, and the border shepherd had snapped at him. She was not a big dog, but she was fast, and Petulengro had only just escaped being bitten. She eyed him now, and her ears flattened as she recognized him. She showed her teeth in a snarl, and he decided that he didn't want to risk getting close to her again. "No," he said, "she'll bite me." "Curse you!" Jerome snarled. "Who cares if you're bitten? Get that dog now!" Normally, Petulengro wouldn't dare to disobey Jerome. But the big man had his hands full, and there was little he could do. Later on, he might remember Petulengro's disobedience, but later on could take care of itself. Jerome cursed him, but the boy continued to shake his head. "Hild can do it," he said. "I'll get Hild." "What? Hild? What's Hild doing here?" Jerome was puzzled by the suggestion, but he was tiring rapidly and wasn't sure how much longer he could control Demon Tooth. "She's collecting red berries for Drina. She's just out there." Jerome gave up the argument. He needed someone to bring the shepherd along, and he had no more time for discussion. Hild would serve as well as anyone. He could deal with Petulengro later, when they were back in the camp. "All right, get her, but hurry!" The boy ran back down the path to the right angle fork. Looking around desperately, he uttered a low cry of relief as he saw the old woman stripping red berries from a bush some 10 meters back along the track. "Hild!" he shouted. "Come here!" She looked up. Then, as he gestured urgently to her, she began to hobble down the track. As she reached him, he impatiently dashed the basket from her hands and grabbed her sleeve, hurrying her along. "Come on, hurry up, blast you!" She stumbled into the clearing and saw Jerome struggling with a terrible, huge dog. Then she caught her breath as she saw a black and white form cowering on the far side of the clearing. Ebony. Chained, tail between her legs, ears flattened to her head, her coat matted with dirt and mud. It was all Alice could do to keep herself from calling out her name. "Unchain the shepherd and bring her along," Jerome ordered. His voice was tight as he struggled with the surging, twisting black monster held between his knees. Alice ran to the dog. As she approached, Ebony's ears came up as she recognized a familiar and beloved scent. With senses far more accurate than any human's, she penetrated Alice's disguise immediately. Alice fumbled with the chain to loosen it. "Get a move on! I can't hold this one all day!" Jerome yelled at her. Demon Tooth, sensing that Jerome's attention was distracted, made a sudden violent lunge, sending the roamer off balance and breaking his grip on the collar. As Jerome sprawled on the damp grass, Demon Tooth, trained to attack other dogs without hesitation, launched himself across the clearing at Ebony. As the massive killer bore down on her, Ebony, finally free of the chain, crouched with her head low, hindquarters high. She was a sheepdog, and she was bred to move fast and change direction in an instant. Demon Tooth was less than a meter away when Ebony sprang to one side. The killer's jaws clopped shut on empty air. Demon Tooth spun, skidding on his haunches to renew the attack. But now Alice had interposed herself between the two dogs. She had scooped up a fallen tree limb from the ground, and she thrust it at the charging dog, catching Demon Tooth's neck in the forked branches at its end. For a moment, it checked Demon Tooth's momentum, although Alice was driven back. But then the branch snapped, and Demon Tooth snarled as he focused on the two-legged target who had attacked him. He gathered the muscles of his hind legs, ready to spring at Alice's throat. Alice heard a whiz-thunk, and a long grey-shafted arrow suddenly appeared in the centre of Demon Tooth's chest. The huge dog staggered under the impact. He gave one brief howl of agony, then his legs collapsed and he fell on his side. Jerome looked in horror at the sight of his dog lying lifeless on the ground. In the confusion of the moment, he hadn't seen the arrow. But he had seen the old woman, Hild, attack his dog with a tree limb. Now Demon Tooth lay unmoving. "You old witch!" he screamed and sprang at her. He fastened his hands around her throat, shaking her and choking her. Alice fought against him, but he was too strong. Her head snapped back and forth and her vision began to fade. Then a black and white shape flew at Jerome, leaping high to fasten her teeth on his arm. Jerome yelled. Ebony hung grimly from his forearm, her teeth sunk deep in the flesh. Her weight threw him off balance. He staggered, caught his foot on a tree root, and fell, crashing across the still body of Demon Tooth. "Let go, Eb! Come here, girl!" Alice gasped. Obediently, Ebony released her grip on Jerome's arm and trotted to her friend, tail sweeping heavily from side to side. Jerome tried to rise as well. Nursing the arm Ebony had bitten against his side, he put his other hand on Demon Tooth's prone body to give him purchase to rise, and realized, too late, that the dog was still alive. Maddened by rage and pain, Demon Tooth snarled at the touch and attacked blindly. Jerome's shout of terror was cut off as the dog's teeth snapped closed around his throat. Jerome thrashed wildly, trying to break that dreadful grip, gurgling horribly. Then he was still. Now, Demon Tooth turned those terrible yellow eyes on the girl and the dog a few meters away. Rising shakily to his feet, he snarled a challenge. Ebony, ears flattened back against her head, the white ruff of fur around her throat standing erect until it was twice its normal size, leapt to place herself between Alice and the slowly approaching monster. Whiz-thunk! The second arrow hit Demon Tooth in the side, just behind the left foreleg. Without a further sound, the killer dog fell, dead before he hit the ground. Will stepped out of the trees, his bow in his hand. He ran to Alice and Ebony and didn't know which one to hug first. So he went down on his knees beside them and threw his arms around both of them. Both of them seemed quite happy with that arrangement. One of them even licked his hand. He couldn't see through the tears in his eyes, but he hoped it was Ebony.